My name is James Vaughn. I'm from Gardendale, Alabama, just north of Birmingham. And I'd like for people to understand something about history and love it as much as I do, because if you study your history, you know where to go. There's been so many mistakes made in history, and we don't need to repeat them. This point that we're at right now is Fort Mims, Alabama. It's a pivotal point in American history, especially for the South. Because of what happened here, so many other things resulted from it. And when the Creeks made the attack here, over half the people in this fort were also Creeks. There was a Creek Civil War going on because of the change in the economy at the time. You had the Tecumseh coming down trying to have an Indian nation that was united. His influence was here. But because the attack made on Fort Mims, Andrew Jackson was able to move into the presidency because Tennessee raised so many volunteers under the command of Andrew Jackson, it became the volunteer state. You had Manifest Destiny came about partly because of this place right here. But it was a Creek Civil War that was going on. The Creeks were fighting the Creeks in order to maintain their old ways, which could no longer be done. And you had the modern Creeks trying to move into modern society. When the Creeks had the massacre, the way it was publicized, there was a massacre here by anyone's definition. The Creeks went into Tennessee and had raids even before it occurred here, so the Tennessee people were scared to death of the Creeks. And as soon as they heard about Fort Mims, they came down to Alabama to keep the Creeks from coming into Tennessee. When Andrew Jackson got down here fighting the Creeks, you have William Weatherford, the story of Red Eagle. Well, he was not called Red Eagle, he was William Weatherford, Billy Weatherford, and a great Creek leader. But what people don't realize was Sam Dale was one of our greatest Indian fighters. And when Sam Dale was married, when Weatherford was married, Sam Dale was his best man. So this was not a war like we think of. This was neighbors fighting neighbors. It was kinfolks fighting kinfolks. It was a civil war. And as a result of it, Alabama, as Mississippi Territory at the time, I don't know how I should say it, but it got developed because my ancestors came in with Andrew Jackson. They fought the Creeks. They loved the land. They went back, packed up, and came back and settled in Alabama. My relatives were living amongst the Creeks. You got to remember, not all Creeks were red sticks. Not all Creeks wanted war. Many of the Creeks were white sticks. They wanted to have peace. And with what's going on in the world today, we can see the same thing going on. So if we study what happened here, we know better how to deal with what's going on now. It's very important that we study history and not make the same mistakes. Anything else you'd like me to?
Well, I don't know. We keep making the same mistakes. Interesting. What were some of the tactical mistakes that were made here at the fort?
Okay. At this particular point in time, the militia was often commanded for political gain other than military knowledge. The man that was in charge here was a military appointee because he was friends with the commanding general of the Mississippi militia. He was a lawyer by training, and he'd been elected sheriff, he'd been a politician, different offices, and he got the job as the commander at this fort. He was not trained in military tactics. He was convinced that just because he was here, no Indian would dare attack. Well, he didn't understand the Indians. And
his name was?
Beasley, Major Beasley. Now, if Dixon Bailey, who was in charge of the militia, and many of the militia were Creek, if he'd been in charge, this fort would not have been taken, in my opinion, because he understood the Creeks, he understood what the battle was, because the Creek Indians did not understand sage warfare, which is what you do when you're trying to take a fort that is secure. They didn't have cannons. They didn't have ways of breaching the walls other than by fire, and that's not effective. So if you're in a defensive position, even a bad defensive position, it should take 3 people attacking for everyone defending. If you're in a good defensive position, it takes 5 or more. So you can see, even if there were and some say as many as 1,000 Red Sticks attacking this fort with about 400 defenders here, you see it still should have been a victory for the fort. It was not, because Beasley made so many mistakes. He did not listen to his intelligence. He was told the Indians were here, and they said, "You got to be lying because I know more than you do because I've been politically appointed." Now, I'm making a point here.
I think I met some people like that.
Making a point with sarcasm. So one man rode in and said, "I seen him, I know him, I don't know what's going on." He said, "I'm going to flog you." He said, "No, you're not," and he rode off. So he had plenty of intelligence, military, what we call military intelligence. If he had listened to it, he could have defended the fort. He placed the portholes for firing at shoulder level so they wouldn't have to stand on anything to shoot out. Well, that means the people on the outside can also shoot in, which was done. That's one reason the fort was taken. When you're inside a fort and you're using a weapon like this, which you can only get off about 3 shots a minute, 4 at the most, that means while you're loading, someone's running at you with a war club. Once the Creeks gained the fort, they didn't use guns. They takes too long to load. They use their war clubs. You can imagine trying to load a weapon like this while someone's running at you, screaming their head off, swinging a war club. It's very effective warfare that the Creeks performed here. They knew what they were doing. The commander did not know what he was doing. If Dixon Bailey had been in charge of the fort, it wouldn't have happened. The gates could not even be closed.
Beasley died in the first round, though.
He did act bravely at the battle. I must give him credit for that. He tried to secure the gates. He died bravely by all accounts. But he was not a good commander. Now, when the Indians attacked and secured, with the beat of the drum for the call to lunch, the attack was made, and they can cover that ground from the woods to the gate before they could be closed. Most of the militia died, from what we understand, near the gate, so they were doing their job and trying to defend the fort. But it was too late. Between all the tactical mistakes that had been made, not listening to intelligence, not knowing your enemy, not knowing their way of warfare, there was other forts in this area. This was not the only fort. Some of the positions that the Indians could attack only had less than 20 people there, but they chose this one, and they chose it for a number of reasons. One is because Indians that were leading the attack hated Dixon Bailey. He was their enemy for a number of reasons. Some things that happened near here, some things that happened at Burnt Corn. So it was you might say, a blood feud against him and some of the others. So the attack is being made on Mims for retaliation, plus the gates open. It's also said that Weatherford was in favor of attacking this fort because he was informed that the military was here and that the fort would be successfully defended. Weatherford had mixed emotions, by all accounts, that are reliable about fighting the war. But I like to compare him with Robert E. Lee. When Robert E. Lee was offered the command of the Northern Army, Virginia was succeeding, he had to decide what to do. And they said he prayed all night long, and he decided he must go with his home state of Virginia. That's where his loyalty lied, was with his home state of Virginia. And so he became the commanding general of the Southern Army eventually. Weatherford was in the same situation. He had family inside Fort Mims, but he had to decide what to do. Well, when he was more or less addressed and said, "You want to fight with us or you want to die?" Well, he was a brave man. I don't believe he was ever scared of dying. But he made a decision to go with his people, just as I believe Robert E. Lee did in the Civil War. So he decided to go with his people, let's call them the Red Sticks, even though his relatives were inside the fort. But he wanted it to be a quick war and be over with and the point made. Well, it didn't happen that way because of the mistakes that were made by Major Beasley here. It got to be a bloodbath, a massacre. Weatherford was so appalled, he tried to stop it. We know that's true. They threatened to kill him. He left. He was not here for the second attack. There was actually 2 attacks here the same day. He was not here at the second attack. He'd actually rode off in disgust and rode to meet his brother, who was nearby, and complained about it to him. So you have a lot of people involved in this that went on to make history. Weatherford was respected by everyone that I know of, and even after he was one of the leaders of the Red Sticks. He was still a favorite member of this community. So you have quite a mixture of peoples involved, personalities. Many of them died right here.